Hey everyone, welcome to today's webinar on subgrantee evaluation, negotiations, and selection, as well as BEAD program design. My name is Brian Mitchell. I'm the Director of the Office of Science, Innovation, and Technology, and I'm glad you're all here. A couple of quick housekeeping items before we get started with today's webinar. I wanted to let you know that today we have posted the webinars and the recordings and the slides from the 3 technical assistance webinars we did last week. So you can find all of those on the OSID BEAD page if you missed anything from last week. We've also posted today on the OSID website, and you should be getting an email from us. If it's not already in your inbox, it will be very shortly, that we have officially opened the BEAD subgrantee selection process, and the application period has begun. Applications are due October 10th, and today marks the start of a 45-day clock, wherein you will have the opportunity to apply. So all of the application materials will be in your inbox and on the OSID website here within the hour. We're very excited for that, and we're very much looking forward to seeing all of your applications for BEAD. As we've been saying, we're in the midst of doing a number of technical assistance webinars. So today is on BEAD program design, and then we hope you'll all come back and join us for the BEAD scoring rubric that we'll do a little bit later this week. I'll also flag that the application portal will open in early September, and we'll be doing a full demonstration and walkthrough of the application portal when it opens. But in the meantime, all of the application materials will be available today on the OSID website, as well as to those of you who have subscribed to our mailing list. So please make sure to check that out and get started. There's a lot of work to do, and we hope that you're able to all get applications in. So again, today we have the webinar on BEAD program design. If you go to the next slide, here is our agenda for today. And I'd like to turn things over to my colleague, Joanne Hovis from CTC, who's going to walk you through the agenda today. And as we've done with previous agenda items, following the conclusion of the presentation materials, we'll stop the recording, and then we'll take any questions from you all. And just to answer the first question right now, yes, this webinar is being recorded, and we will also post all of the slides on the website once we've been able to get the recording all set up. So with that, I'm very pleased to turn things over to Joanne to walk things over. Joanne, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Brian, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here for today's technical assistance webinar. This is a critically important set of topics that we are going to discuss today, because what we will be discussing are the ways in which, or some of the ways in which, the BEAD program and the design of that program are extremely different to any other broadband program that any of us have encountered in the past, for a variety of reasons having to do with the way that Congress designed BEAD in appropriating the funds for BEAD in the IIJA, as well as the ways that NTIA, the federal agency that oversees the states in administering the BEAD program, the ways that they have interpreted Congress's intent. For a variety of reasons related to all that, BEAD really looks unlike any broadband grant program that has ever been administered in the past by any state or the federal government. And some of the elements that are so singular and important are what we will be discussing today. Our agenda is 4-part. First, we're going to talk about project area design and how that has been set up under federal guidelines. And I know that some of that you have all already seen as the project area, the proposed project areas have been available through OSIT for a while. Then we're going to talk about benchmark pricing and how that functions as part of how the BEAD grant program will work in Nevada. We'll talk then about the federal rules around application prioritization for purpose with respect to technologies. And this is a very complex and definitive set of rules for how OSIT is permitted to prioritize applications by technology. And then we'll talk about the process through which OSIT will go in evaluating all of the applications it receives in order to make selections. All of this is done within the framework of not only the law as written by Congress and interpreted by NTIA, but also within the framework, critically important, of the state of Nevada's initial proposal, Volume 2. I know that is a document that all of you are familiar with. This is the document that was required under the statute for each state to write to the federal government, the initial proposal. Volume 1 dealt with the challenge process. Volume 2 deals with the grant program and how it will be administered. And Volume 2 was submitted by OSIT to the federal government at the end of last year. It was also made available for public comment before that time, so you were all able to review it and provide public comment. And then once the federal government had made some requests for changes, what they call curing, NTIA approved Nevada's initial proposal, Volume 2, or IPV2, as it is sometimes called. And that is the document that governs how OSIT will administer the BEAD program. I am emphasizing this now because it is so important to note that that document, IPV2 Initial Proposal, Volume 2, is the governing document for the BEAD program in Nevada, as each state's IPv2 is in every other state. The Nevada IPv2 is the most important document for you all to consult and reference as you develop your grant applications. It is the Bible for this program, and I strongly recommend that it's a document that you review and keep close to you and consult as you are preparing your applications. The 4 areas that I'm going to talk about in today's webinar are discussed in IPv2 or in guidance NTIA has provided with regard to IPv2. And what you see here in the agenda are the pages in the Nevada IPv2 that deal with these different areas. And I reference those because I think it's very important that you not only have the information in this technical assistance webinar, but also that document to guide you as you prepare your applications, so you are fully aware of how the state of Nevada has designed this program and what the federal government has required and approved. All right, I think I've beaten that point into the ground. So moving on, just a quick overall timeline here. That initial proposal, including Volume 2, was submitted in late December of last year. It was approved on June 13th. The challenge process, as you know, was run earlier this year, which determined the map that gives us all of the eligible locations that can be used in OSIT's grant program in selecting subgrantees under the BEAD program. And then through a request for input that was made available earlier this summer for the project areas that are going to be used in the grant program, there was a process in which input was solicited from all of you attending today and all other entities. We are now in the midst of pre-qualification. with some early submission information. And of course, we have also, OSID has published the finalized project areas. So subgrantee selection kicks off, as Brian said. The process opens today, and we anticipate that given the one-year statutory framework from when the initial proposal, Volume 2, was approved by NTIA in June, that in approximately the third quarter of 2025, implementation is likely or the final proposal for implementation will be provided to NTIA, and hopefully NTIA will approve by the fourth quarter of 2025. Moving on to project area design, and the first topic that was on the list of our agenda. I think you are all familiar with this because it is something that, as the timeline showed, was made available by OSIT earlier this summer with the request for input, seeking guidance about how to design project areas. What OSIT has done is created a structure in which each application will, by design, be required to provide a proposal to serve all of the BEAD eligible locations in a regional project area, or RPA. The regional project areas are groupings of BEAD eligible locations that have been designed by OSIT based on modeling, data mapping, and input from multiple stakeholders. Applicants must provide a separate application for each regional project area because each regional project area is a separate project. Applicants can bid on one or as many as they like regional project areas, but must submit a separate application for each of the regional project areas. And each one will be scored separately with a single awardee selected for each regional project area. It's important to note that an application, in order to be compliant with the structure that was established by OSIT in the initial proposal, Volume 2, has to propose to serve every location within the regional project area. Every location must be a part of the proposal. If an application takes exception to serving any location or refuses to serve 100% of all locations, it will not be compliant with the program and will not be considered. It will not be scored. It will not be awarded. The project areas were designed with a number of criteria that were described in detail in the initial proposal, Volume 2, and you see the page reference here. It was based on geography, based on number of locations, based on OSIT's assessment of how to make the bidding opportunity economically attractive for applicants, create competitive opportunity and neutrality, and maximize competition in the number of applicants, make it cost-effective and economically viable for applicants to bid on particular regional project areas, and take into account all of the various considerations, including topography, terrain, existence to infrastructure, and all other kinds of factors that are relevant to the deployment of broadband and the cost to deploy broadband where appropriate. The Nevada Regional Project Area Map has the official list of RPAs that were released for comment and then finalized following the input that was received. And then the locations, the specific locations in each RPA was finalized through the challenge process that is now completed. The RPA map is on the OSIT website and is available for your use and analysis in preparing your applications. As I said, each RPA is an individual project area that requires an application and a cost, proposed cost from each applicant, separate to any other RPA application. This list of RPAs and the eligible locations within them is now confirmed and not expected to change during the process. Although additional information may be added to the map, we don't anticipate that the RPAs or the eligible locations themselves will change. The attributes that are available on the map are listed here, and this information is going to be important for preparing an application. It includes an ID number for each RPA, whether it's tribal, whether it qualifies as a high-cost area, and the number of eligible locations, BEAD eligible locations within the RPA. Those BEAD eligible locations being broadband serviceable locations and community anchor institutions within that RPA. And what you see there in the graphic is an illustration, an example of a particular RPA and the information that is currently available on the website. Let's talk about the benchmark pricing and how it relates to the RPA. Benchmark pricing is an additional set of data that OSIT will employ for the purpose of determining scoring of the proposed cost submitted by the applicant for the RPA. Now, I know we have another technical assistance webinar coming up later this week on scoring, a deep dive into scoring and the BEAD scoring rubric, and there'll be more discussion of that later. So I'm not going to talk in detail about the scoring formula itself. I'm just going to talk here about how benchmark pricing will fit in. Benchmark pricing is not a floor or a ceiling on what you can propose for any given RPA. It is not designed to constrain you in what you propose, either in that being the minimum amount or the maximum amount. It's not designed for either of those things. What it is designed for is to create a mechanism by which OSIT can score the cost that you do propose. And the way it will work effectively is that benchmark scoring will be established for each RPA. And hypothetically, let's say that for RPA X, the benchmark scoring will be Y dollars. An applicant that proposes lower than that amount will get greater points in scoring. An applicant that proposes higher than that amount will get fewer points in scoring of the cost. The purpose being just to provide a fair way that can be applied the same to every applicant for scoring the cost that is proposed. And by the cost that is proposed, what I mean is the subsidy amount, the number of dollars that the applicant asks for from OSIT in order to be willing to build and operate network to 100% of the eligible locations in that RPA. So consider benchmark pricing to be something that you can use to understand what OSIT believes may be the reasonable amount to propose for an RPA. Also consider it something that you can use to determine your strategy for that RPA, that you know that if you provide a cost lower than the benchmark price, you are likely to get higher points. If it is higher than the benchmark price, you are likely to get lower points, and you can build your strategy accordingly as you think about your competition. But we encourage you to provide a cost that you think is reasonable and that you know will allow you to actually deploy and operate network in that RPA. The benchmark pricing just allows you to estimate what your points may be for the cost that you propose. Let me move on now to application prioritization. And what I'm going to talk about here is something that I think is frequently also misunderstood about the BEAD program. And what I'm referring to here, and what I'm going to show you initially, is material that comes right out of the federal government. These are NTIA documents that I am showing you here because the prioritization of technologies and which technologies can be used is something that has been established by NTIA, by the federal government, and for which neither Nevada nor any other state has the ability to vary or control or change relative to what the federal government has required. And this is in order to just show you the framework of how those decisions are made based on the federal guidance, and then the process that OSIT has designed for fitting within that federal framework. Let me start with this, and this, obviously, all of this material will be available to you on the OSIT website because this webinar will be archived there. But the terms of art that the federal government uses, the key definitions are included there. The important thing to note here is that the term priority broadband project means a project that is end-to-end optical fiber facilities. Under the federal rules, priority has to be for end-to-end fiber. Other technologies also qualify as reliable broadband service, so not just fiber, but also cable modem or hybrid fiber coax, HFC technology, DSL, if it meets certain technical requirements. Under number 5 there, you can see the BEAD technical requirements, and terrestrial fixed wireless technology that uses licensed spectrum or a hybrid of licensed and unlicensed spectrum. So those reliable broadband services can also be funded, but fiber optic technology is the priority. Priority broadband project has to be end-to-end fiber. There's more detail here about what that means and what the technical requirements are. And then finally, another important definition, alternative technology. The federal government has noted that an alternative, meaning not reliable broadband service, is a technology that is either unlicensed fixed wireless or low Earth orbit satellite, but that does not qualify as reliable broadband service. Now, why is all of this important? It is important because there is a prioritization that NTIA has established for how the states have to consider applications from their applicants for BEAD funds. And the highest priority goes to what the federal government calls priority broadband projects, end-to-end fiber. And what the federal government is anticipating, as you can see from this inverted pyramid, is that as many as possible, and in federal preference, ideally almost all or all locations will be funded to as much as possible, so long as there are funds available, with priority broadband projects, meaning end-to-end fiber. The second level of prioritization, but lower priority than end-to-end fiber, are reliable broadband services that still qualify as reliable broadband: HFC, hybrid fiber coax, DSL, that's digital subscriber line, and licensed fixed wireless that fit the definitions of reliable broadband service and qualifying broadband. And then finally, lowest priority for those locations where the higher priority projects, the higher priority technologies are not feasible because there are no applications or there are no affordable applications, alternative technologies, unlicensed fixed wireless, and low Earth orbit satellite. That is the federal prioritization. This graphic is taken from an NTIA document that was released early this year. And what that means is that the federal rules for how the states can select technologies other than fiber are that only where it is not feasible for the state to fund fiber because the fiber applications for a given project area are too expensive, or in federal jargon, that they exceed the extremely high cost per location threshold, the state can then consider other technologies if the fiber applications are simply too expensive. This is a lot of jargon, but let me just share that the extremely high cost per location threshold is this federal language that NTIA is using to describe how the state may select technologies other than fiber if it demonstrates that the proposals for fiber are simply above this extremely high cost per location threshold, or otherwise put, the available funds for that project area, given the fact that there have to be funds for all of the project areas across the state. That is a lot of jargon. Let me show you another way that the federal government has shown us how this can be considered. And again, this is a federal graphic. This is from NTIA that was also released early this year. If you start on the left and follow the graphic from the left across to the right and then down and then over to the left, what you see is NTIA anticipates that proposals will be submitted by applicants. The first thing the state will determine is, are there priority bids? Priority meaning end-to-end fiber. If there are, the state is then required to consider, is the cost of the highest scoring priority bid within the budget the state has, meaning is it under the extremely high cost per location threshold? If it is within the budget that the state has available for that grant area, that project area, then the state must choose that highest scoring priority broadband application. That is the end-to-end fiber application. If it is not, if the priority applications are not within the budget or the extremely high cost per location threshold, then the state can consider, is there an application for a reliable broadband service other than fiber, meaning HFC, DSL, or licensed fixed wireless, or hybrid licensed, unlicensed fixed wireless. If there are applications for that technology, then again, the state has to ask the question, is the cost within budget? Is the cost within the extremely high cost per location threshold? If yes, then the high scoring application that is within budget has to be selected. Only if not, only if there is not a reliable broadband service offer that is within the budget, meaning under the extremely high cost per location threshold, can the state then consider selecting unlicensed fixed wireless or low Earth orbit satellite? So you see there the hierarchy of technologies that we saw on the earlier slide, going back to that, the prioritization of different technologies. Here you see NTIA's view of how the process will work to consider these different technologies. That NTIA requires that before the state even consider technologies that are not end-to-end fiber, that it consider whether there are end-to-end fiber bids and whether they are within budget. And only if they are not, may the state then move on to other technologies. First, those that meet the definition of reliable broadband service, and then those that do not meet the definition of reliable broadband service. That is NTIA's guidance. That is the framework within which every state in the country has to run its BEAD program, and within which every state had to design its initial proposal volume 2. Now, what does that mean in terms of the detailed process that OSIT has proposed in initial proposal volume 2? This is a graphic that shows you a little bit more detail about how OSIT will put some more flesh on the bones of the graphic that we just looked at. And what I'm going to show you here in this graphic, like everything else in this deck, comes out of the initial proposal volume 2. And I just want to encourage you again, look at the initial proposal volume 2, because all of this is described in some detail in narrative form. I'm going to show you here a couple of different slides. The first slide, which is number 1 here, is selection of priority broadband, consideration of priority broadband applications, right? End-to-end fiber. Then I'm going to move on to number 2, non-priority broadband, what NTIA called other reliable broadband services. That was HFC, DSL, and licensed fixed wireless. And finally, you can see at the bottom, last resort, other technologies. That would be 3. So let's start with 1, priority broadband applications, end-to-end fiber applications. The process starts on the left with the orange box, where the applications are received and they are then ranked, first by technology, because fiber has to be highest under NTIA's prioritization, then by other reliable broadband services, and then by score. So ranking of the applications after they're scored, first by technology and then by score. For the regional project areas that get no proposals, as you can read about in the IPv2, those will be posted on the chance that there may be other entities that wish to submit proposals. But the applications that are received will be scored and ranked first by technology and then by score. And then OSIT will follow the process that was laid out in that NTIA graphic, first considering the fiber applications, the priority broadband projects, looking at those that are highest ranked, taking the highest ranked application for each regional project area or RPA and asking, is the highest ranked application within the budget, within the extremely high cost per location threshold? If yes, that highest ranked application for that regional project area will be preliminarily assigned as that applicant will, subject to full vetting of their application, be the awardee. If the application that is highest ranked exceeds the budget, Then OSIT may be able to bring the applicant within the budget through negotiations. And will seek to, through negotiations, bring the applicant's pricing within the budget. And then if it is brought within budget or below the extremely high cost per location threshold, preliminarily assign that location. This will depend on how much budget is available, which will depend heavily on how the proposals come in and at what price. And OSIT will be running analyses and analytics throughout to determine how much budget is available for each of the RPAs based on what the proposals are. For any application that is simply too expensive and that where there is no way to bring it within the budget, that application will be removed from consideration, and the next highest ranking application will then have the same level of review, determine whether it is within budget, and if not, a potential negotiation, or it is removed from consideration. If it is within budget, it could be preliminarily assigned. And this is with all of the fiber applications. Once this process has been exhausted for every RPA, regional project area, for which fiber applications have been received, OSIT will then, only after exhausting all of those applications, move on to the non-priority selection phase of the effort, looking at applications for other reliable broadband services that are not end-to-end fiber, that are not, in NTIA's language, priority broadband projects. And that takes us to phase two. And what happens here is effectively the same process. What will happen now is that OSIT will look at all of the applications that were received for non-fiber reliable broadband service, and in order of ranking, which is based on score now, will consider, is the application for any particular regional project area that did not get a fiber award, is the application within the budget? Is it below the extremely high cost per location threshold? And if not, will a negotiation bring it within the budget? If yes, if it is within the budget, it can be preliminarily assigned. If there is no way to bring it within the budget and there's simply not sufficient funding available, it would be removed from consideration, and the next highest ranking application would then get the same process. This will be done for every regional project area that did not already get a fiber preliminary assignment, and that did get reliable broadband service applications, to try to assign to the highest ranking possible application a reliable broadband service award for as many regional project areas as possible. OSIT has also given itself the potential to use some additional strategies once it has exhausted this process, in order to try to maximize the opportunity to get a reliable broadband service for as many regional project areas as possible. There may be the opportunity for inducements to try to attract applicants who are interested in nearby regional project areas or incumbents in those regional project areas to offer attractive pricing for those regional project areas through inducements that might be something like reducing the match requirement, noting that a reduction in the match requirement will require NTIA permission that OSIT does not have control over, but it would be something that could be considered at that point, or possibly inducements from local communities, or perhaps a last resort option of allowing removal of a few very high cost locations if necessary. But at this point, OSIT will consider whether it is able to use these strategies to try to assign a reliable broadband service application to more regional project areas. And for those regional project areas for which there is no option under step 1 or step 2, OSIT will then, as a last resort under NTIA's framework, move on to considering other alternative technologies. And that is as defined by NTIA, as you will recall, in the prioritization, that would be unlicensed fixed wireless and low Earth orbit satellite. That is the last resort that you see here in the pink box, in the event that there are no priority applications that are affordable or within budget, and no reliable broadband service applications that are affordable and within budget. The selection process for all of this will involve these processes, and these are all described in the initial proposal, volume 2. First, the initial review to determine eligibility and possibly allow curing of defects in the application. Second, a technical review, which will be an independent evaluation of technical aspects of the project to ensure feasibility and that minimum technical requirements are established. And this will be done by subject matter experts. Final review, which will include all of the scoring criteria that are described in the initial proposal, volume 2, and then recommendations from the subject matter experts doing that review to OSIT. OSIT will then publish its awarded subgrantees on the website, and there will be an opportunity then for appeal or protest. Notably, and going back to prioritization of subgrantees, the brief summary of how that process will work is that OSIT will, of course, assess each regional project area and look first at priority broadband projects, as well as all of the other requirements in the BEAD NOFO. So it's not enough to just propose a priority broadband project or an end-to-end fiber project. The application has to be fully compliant with all of the other elements, the required BEAD elements. And then the highest ranking priority broadband project is potentially the default winner, so long as it is fully compliant with all of the requirements of the BEAD program, proposes to serve 100% of the eligible locations in the regional project area, and is within the budget or the extremely high cost per location threshold. In the event that there are no applications that meet the criteria for a priority broadband project, then OSIT can consider the alternatives that were described in initial proposal volume 2, that it may be able to fund the area with fiber if it has sufficient funding, that the budget can be increased, or it will look at applications that are not priority broadband projects, as I described just a couple of minutes ago. I'm going to pause now and turn it back over to Brian. Thanks.
Hey, thanks so much, Joanne, for walking through that information. And there's a lot of information there, and certainly it is somewhat complicated. And so I appreciate that explanation, and also the references back to the initial proposal, volume 2. I think it's a lengthy document, but it really lays everything out that we're required to do by NTIA. One or two quick other thoughts for you all prior to opening things up for questions, and I appreciate the seeing some questions coming in the chat. So we'll get to those here in just a second. The first thing I'll kind of talk a little bit about is that OSIT really wants to make the entire process attractive to internet service providers, to potential applicants. And so one of the ways that we are, we understand that this is complicated and a little bit different than some of the other broadband projects or funding opportunities that have come out previously. And so one of the ways that we have beyond providing technical assistance webinars like this one of the ways that we are working to try to make things as easy as possible for you all in your efforts to apply is by providing an application portal that asks very specific questions. And so the questions will guide you through the application process to ensure that you are submitting all of the required information necessary for you to have a successful application. Referring back to these webinars, as well as to some of the frequently asked questions documents that we'll be posting, will be helpful as well. And one point I think of clarification that's important in terms of the what is considered a priority project versus a reliable broadband service project, and so on down the line. A question that I've got asked in the past is, what about a hybrid project that is hybrid fiber and fixed wireless? And that would also fall into the category of a reliable broadband service project rather than a priority project. So if you're planning to do a fiber, a project that includes some fiber and some wireless, that project would be considered not a priority project because it is not end-to-end fiber. Another clarification I just wanted to make is that OSIT, and just wanted to be clear that OSIT does not intend or plan to remove any locations from any RPAs during the process. Ultimately, we have to certify that every single location to NTIA has been served. And the way that we are doing that is by having individual applications and individual awards for each RPA. And we want to ensure that every location is served. Now, there is one exception to that. And despite all of our efforts and your efforts and everybody's efforts, the fabric that we have from the FCC is still not perfect. And so there are still some rocks and some large trees and some shipping containers and some dumpsters and water towers that are still showing up as broadband serviceable locations. If you're interested in Las Vegas, there's also a freeway interchange that is currently a broadband serviceable location. So in limited circumstances, we will provide specific guidance to applicants where if you identify a location that is not a broadband serviceable location, it's not a house, it's clearly something else, there'll be a process for you to identify it as such. And that will include providing evidence that you have filed a fabric location challenge with the FCC on the location.